Thank you. That concludes general questions. We move on to the next item of business, which is First Minister's questions. And at question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In criminal cases, prosecutors often strike plea deals with defence lawyers. This practice can result in very serious charges being watered down or dropped altogether, even where the evidence is overwhelming. And victims are routinely not told or consulted. This is not justice. I've been working with a group of female domestic abuse survivors, including Liz Shanks, who suffered from these secretive plea deals. And this week I've submitted amendments to the Government's Victims Bill on their behalf. This would give victims a voice in the process, or at the very least to know what is happening. So will John Swinney work with me to back these critical amendments?
First Minister.
President Officer, I share Mr Finlay's objective of wanting to ensure that justice is done for those who are individuals who suffer as a result of criminal behaviour in our society. And the Government is bringing forward a bill, the Victims and Witnesses Bill, which is currently being scrutinised within Parliament, which is designed to strengthen the experience of victims within our criminal justice system. We will, of course, consider the amendments that Mr Finlay has put forward on behalf of those individuals. Liz Shanks was the name that he mentioned, are advancing those issues, and consider the contents of those amendments as Parliament, as the committee and as Parliament looks at the contents of the bill.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you. Let me ask the First Minister about another horrific case involving a plea deal. RAF veteran Keith Rawlinson went out to work as a bus driver but never came home. He was subjected to a frenzied attack by a 15-year-old passenger and died later in hospital. And due to the sentencing guidelines, the killer received a sentence of just over 4 years, and it's possible that he won't spend any time in prison. The killer was charged with murder, but in a plea deal admitted a lesser charge of culpable homicide. Keith's widow Sue is heartbroken, hurt and confused. She told me, "The justice system keeps twisting a knife in my back. I don't want any other family to go through this hell." So does John Swinney agree that these guidelines need to be scrapped?
First Minister.
First of all, let me express my sympathy to Mrs Rawlinson at the loss of her husband. The attack that Mr Finlay talks about was unspeakable, and the criminal justice process has taken its course, and I extend my sympathies to Mrs Rawlinson on her loss. I cannot comprehend how she will be feeling. I think the issue that Mr Finlay raises is an important issue, but it gets us into the territory which Mr Finlay knows I have to keep well out of, which is about the decisions that are made about independent prosecutions which are taken forward by the Crown. We pride ourselves as a society, indeed the constitution of our Parliament and our criminal justice system is founded on the independence of the judiciary and the independence of the Crown in determining approaches to prosecution. That has been the fundamental building blocks of our society. Now, of course, it is important that Parliament expresses its view where it considers these issues need to be addressed to ensure that concerns about sentencing policy and about prosecutorial policies are reflected by Parliament where it is appropriate for Parliament to do so. But these decisions ultimately are taken independently by the Prosecution Service and by the judiciary.
Russell Finlay.
I mean, the truth is that these guidelines were issued by the Scottish Sentencing Council, which was in turn created by the Scottish Government. I also want to ask the First Minister about one of Scotland's greatest miscarriages of justice. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that George Beattie did not, and indeed could not, have murdered Margaret McLaughlin. Campaigners, including the late Labour MP Jimmy Hood, has spent 50 years fighting for justice on behalf of George and Margaret. 4 years ago, new evidence emerged about a more likely suspect, but the authorities appeared to do nothing. Now in his 70s and in poor health, George tells me that he fears going to his grave as a murderer. So will John Swinney consider what his government can do to right this egregious wrong?
First Minister.
So the first point I would make in relation to Mr Finlay's earlier remarks is that the Scottish Sentencing Council is a creation of statute, but it acts independently of the government to ensure that all of the different elements that I talked about in the criminal justice system, of an independent judiciary, an independent prosecutorial service and then an independent sentencing council that advises about sentencing approaches, is all undertaken to give all of us the assurance that the criminal justice system is operating in a fair and appropriate and a dispassionate fashion across all cases, and that nobody is prejudiced as a consequence. In relation to the case of Mr Beattie, Mr Finlay will be aware that of the route through the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission, where potential miscarriages of justice can be explored. They have, of course, led to cases where judgments and decisions have been overturned in the past, and that is a well-established statutory route through which these approaches can be pursued.
Russell Finlay.
Well, thank you. I hear what the First Minister says about the Scottish Sentencing Council, but perhaps he could heed our calls to include greater voice of victims on that council. Now, in my final question of the year to the First Minister, I want to raise the tragic case of Baby J, whose identity cannot be disclosed. Baby J was found dead in West Lothian 10 years ago. He was just 11 weeks old. The authorities knew he was at risk even before he was born, but that did not protect him. His tiny body had numerous injuries, including multiple broken bones, and a judge said that only his parents could have inflicted these injuries. But no criminal charges have ever been brought. And 6 months ago, I was pleased when the Lord Advocate told me that she had instructed a new investigation by specialist prosecutors. She also said that a fatal accident inquiry might be held. So will the First Minister back my calls for that inquiry and ensure that every effort is made to secure justice for Baby J?
First Minister.
On Mr Finlay's first point, I hope that my first answer to Mr Finlay gives him reassurance that I attach the greatest of significance to the voice of victims being heard within our criminal justice system. And if there are ways in which that needs to be strengthened, indeed we have legislation before Parliament to do exactly that. Indeed, in our former lives, Mr Finlay and I scrutinised that legislation together on the Criminal Justice Committee, and we were able to cooperate there. So perhaps we may be able to cooperate on some of these questions here. So I give him that assurance that we'll look at those points. And of course there is scope for the bill to be amended on the basis of the point that Mr Finlay raises. In relation to the tragic case in West Lothian, the Lord Advocate has made clear that there should be a renewed investigation on that point. The Crown determines whether or not the Crown will determine, on the basis of police investigation, what actions, if any, should be taken forward, and that is the proper role for the Crown to do so. And any question of a fatal accident inquiry again rests independently on the judgment of the Crown, and the Lord Advocate has made clear her position on that, and we will of course hear more from the Lord Advocate as the case is considered.
Thank you. Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I start by wishing you, everyone across this chamber and all the Parliament staff a very Merry Christmas and all the best for 2025, and say a special thank you to our emergency service personnel that will be working throughout the festive period. Presiding Officer, Scotland is in the middle of a housing emergency. While all of us here will wake up this Christmas morning to see the joy on our loved ones' faces, this year a record number of Scots will wake up without a home to call their own. Homelessness is at record levels. 10,000 children are living in temporary accommodation, and hundreds will be left to wake up in hostels, refuge centres and B&Bs. So can I ask John Swinney, is he still proud of his SNP government's record on housing?
First Minister. First of all, so let me associate myself with Mr Sarwar's remarks and express my good wishes to you, Presiding Officer, for a happy Christmas, and to parliamentary staff, and to express my appreciation to those in the emergency services and our volunteer community who will be working, and our public services who will be working hard to keep everybody safe and supported during the Christmas break. In relation to the question of housing, I accept, the Government accepts that there is a housing emergency. We are not building enough houses. We've built more houses, more affordable houses per head of population in Scotland than in other parts of the United Kingdom. but we are not building enough, which is why the Government has significantly increased the housing budget for the next financial year by over £200 million. We will be spending, we've allocated in the budget £768 million, representing a 38% increase in the housing budget to help to build the housing that is required to meet the needs of people in Scotland. So the Government has a strong record on building houses, but we have a changing society that requires more house building, and the Government's putting the resources in place to make sure that can be the case.
Sarwar.
Thank you, President. John Swinney is talking about correcting the mess his own government made, but actually this is about the people here and now. So let me give you one example of thousands. Miriam is a single working mum in Glasgow. Almost 2 years ago, Miriam and her 4 children were evicted after she complained about the mould and leaks that were affecting her children's health. She was forced to declare herself homeless, was put into temporary accommodation and hour from her children's school, where she and her family had been living ever since. 5 people crammed into a 2-bedroom flat. And despite Miriam's efforts, her daughter, who dreamed of being a dentist, had her education so disrupted by the chaos that she missed out on her dream by just 1 mark. First Minister, the housing emergency, of course, has an immediate impact, but can't you see that it's also impacting the life chances and outcomes for our young people? So how can this government be proud of its record?
First Minister.
Well, I think it is important to look at the data and the evidence on this. So, in a period which we've lived through over the last 14 years of punishing austerity, and that's a financial context that Mr Sarwar and I actually agree about, because we both agree that the period of austerity has been incredibly damaging for the public infrastructure and the public fabric of our country and has significant social and economic implications. So he and I agree on that. And in that context, the Scottish Government has built 73% more affordable homes per head of population than in Wales, and 47% more affordable homes than compared to England since 2007. So that is the record of this government, and I will argue for that, because the government has actually, and the facts speak for themselves, the Scottish Government, against the prevailing tide of austerity, has built more affordable houses per head of population than any other part of the United Kingdom. Now, I accept that's not enough, which is why we've just increased the budget. It's why we've put in that commitment to make sure that we can encourage and motivate more house building to address the very issues that Mr Sarwar raises with me today.
Anna Sarwar.
The facts do speak for themselves. 10,000 children in Scotland are in temporary accommodation, a record high, and all the First Minister wants to do is point to other parts of the country rather than look at his own record of failure. And the truth is, this is a crisis years in the making. I would remind people, these are your constituents I'm talking about. Children in your own constituencies that are living in temporary accommodation.
Always through the chair, please.
The truth is, this crisis is years in the making. Miriam's heartbreaking story is just one example of thousands. On John Swinney's watch, house building down
Sarwar.
by 10%, the lowest number of affordable and private homes been built in more than a decade, and there are over 11,000 council houses lying empty. Every statistic, another example of a family failed and a future squandered. As Alison Watson from Shelter Scotland said, despite declaring a national housing emergency earlier this year, the Scottish Government has failed to get to grips with a deepening crisis. More than 10,000 children will wake up facing the trauma of homelessness this Christmas, the highest number on record. 10,000 children without a home to call their own on Christmas morning. So, First Minister, how many children will wake up homeless under this government next year?
First Minister.
President Officer, I agree with the objectives of Mr Sarwar of ensuring that children are not living in poverty. That is absolutely at the heart of my government's programme and at the heart of everything we are trying to do. On housing, I'm afraid it's not good enough for Mr Sarwar to dismiss the points of evidence that I am making. In a climate of austerity, the Scottish Government has built more houses than per head of population, affordable houses, than in any other part of the United Kingdom. Now, that is a simple statement of evidence of the commitment we have given to housing. In the budget proposition that we've put forward, £768 million is being allocated to the budget for housing, and as part of that, resources are available to tackle the issue of voids, which has currently been tackled during this financial year, to bring more properties into use by the use of government expenditure to support that activity. In addition to all of that, the government's budget is providing a record settlement for local authorities with a £1 billion increase in local authority funding to support services which will include homelessness services. Now, this is where we get to the crunch point, because what we'll find out in a few weeks' time is whether Mr Sarwar is interested in a solution or whether Mr Sarwar is just interested in rhetoric, because the government's budget is going to have to be voted for in this Parliament. And the people of this country have just had an insight into Mr Sarwar's rhetoric. We've seen the rhetoric of Mr Sarwar about waspy women, where with the Labour Party, before the election, promising big, bold action on the waspy women, and what the Labour Party has delivered is absolutely nothing whatsoever. So Mr Sarwar is in no position to come here and give any of his rhetoric unless he's prepared to vote for the government's budget and help to lift children out of poverty.
Question number 3, Patrick Harvie.
Presiding Officer, can I also wish you and all Parliament staff and members across the Chamber all the best for the festive season and a good new year. 2024, though, was the year when the Scottish Government had to admit that it's years behind schedule on climate. And in response, the SNP said that they would accelerate action with an energy strategy, a plan to cut car traffic, funding to help agriculture become climate-friendly, and a new bill to get Scotland off the gas grid and roll out clean heating in homes across the country. So far, none of that has happened. That last action is urgent now, because if we get it right, it won't just cut emissions, it'll cut people's energy bills too. The government said it would introduce that bill by the end of this year. Where is it?
First Minister.
So the government's working on bringing forward legislative proposals in this respect, but Mr Harvey's characterisation of the government's programme is not accurate and not representative. On a whole variety of issues, whether it is on transport, whether it is on agriculture, whether it's upon heating, whether it's about renewable energy, whether it's about measures to reduce carbon by investment in forestry and by investment in peatland restoration, the government is taking forward the steps that are necessary to tackle climate action. We will do that as part of a sustained programme. It involves the underpinning of investment in the government's budget of £4.9 billion to support those objectives, and we're determined to fulfil those commitments to Parliament.
Patrick Harvie.
Well, each of the specific examples I mentioned was promised earlier this year and hasn't yet happened. And the First Minister knows that the clean heat industry is only going to take off if the government gives clarity and leadership. So any more delay on this bill is unacceptable. Trust in politics matters. We've just heard John Swinney rightly condemn the UK government for breaching the trust of the waspy women. But this question of trust applies to him too. The Scottish Government promised to accelerate climate action to make up for its record of failure, but it simply isn't happening. The first months of 2025 are going to be critical for Scotland's future efforts on climate. New carbon budgets, a new climate plan, decisions which are going to determine whether we succeed or fail for the next decade. How is anyone supposed to trust that the First Minister will do what needs to be done when we're still waiting for so many of the actions he promised?
First Minister.
I think it does come down to the delivery of actions. And that's what the government is focused on. It's focused on getting on with these things. So, for example, let's take renewable energy, for example. Because of the policy certainty offered by this government, we have essentially decarbonised the electricity network in Scotland by the shift to renewable energy. There are many other aspects of our policy agenda upon which we are delivering. Now, I've made it pretty clear that we don't all have to wait for new plans, new strategies. We've got lots and lots of these things. What's clear is the government's commitment to climate action, to a programme of delivery, and that's what ministers are taking forward. And I look forward to engaging with Mr Harvey and his colleagues about how we can support that by passing the government's budget, because none of what Mr Harvey is talking about will be achieved if the government budget is not passed and the £4.9 billion that we plan to invest in climate action is able to be invested in that.
Thank you. Question number 4, Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what steps the Scottish Government is taking in response to the reported announcement that to ask the First Minister whether the Scottish Government will encourage the public not to buy puppies or dogs during the festive period, in light of the reported possibility that these may be the product of irresponsible breeders, including illegal puppy farms.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, on the basis that a dog is for life, not just for Christmas, the Scottish Government works throughout the year with key stakeholders, including the Scottish SPCA, local authorities and other administrations, to raise awareness of the responsibilities of prospective dog owners and buying a pet safely. In particular, we point to the Scottish SPCA's Christmas campaign on this issue, and we would encourage prospective owners to consider rehoming a dog instead of buying a puppy. We welcome and support Christine Graham's efforts with the Welfare of Dogs Bill. It will help to emphasise to people to act responsibly when deciding to buy or take a dog into their lives and be responsible owners, ensuring the dog's welfare for as long as they have it.
Christine Graham.
Thank the First Minister for his answer. Will the First Minister take this opportunity to commend the responsible breeders and rescue centres which will not home dogs or indeed puppies or kittens over the festive period, as it's the last thing these need, the disturbance, the bright lights and noise as their first introduction to their new home? And that anyone who has concerns that puppies are being trafficked should report this to the police or the SSPCA. If you see a puppy online or you're buying it out of the back of a van in a car park, the public will have no idea where that puppy came from or the misery that brought its journey to that end.
First Minister.
I know and admire and respect the long interest that Christine Graham has taken in these issues, and I commend all of the wise advice that Christine Graham has put on the record for members of the public. I think all of the steps that Christine Graham has set out are valuable steps to make sure that individuals are purchasing pets in a responsible and sustained climate where there is the welfare of the animal has been assured and protected. And I think the advice of my colleague is very important at this time.
Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I also voice my support for the Scottish SPCA's efforts to promote responsible pet purchases and commend the work of Christine Graham and Maurice Golden in their efforts, along with other agencies, to smash the smugglers. The public have an important role to play too, and because ferries are one of the key smuggling channels, especially through the port of Cairnryan, does the First Minister agree with me it's important passengers are aware of the suspicious activity and how to report it? But posters and social media efforts don't always reach everyone. So what more can the Scottish Government do to ensure more passengers receive that message?
First Minister.
Mr Whittle raises an important point, and the Government works closely with officials in the Northern Ireland Government and key agencies through the Pause for Thought puppy trafficking group to disrupt and target those involved in this trade. There are many collaborative actions that are taken between ourselves and the Government in Northern Ireland, and the multi-agency pet trade task force shares intelligence and targets those involved in illegal breeding and the smuggling of puppies. So I hope that gives Mr Whittle some assurance that there is active engagement between the Scottish Government and the Government of Northern Ireland, and also with the other administrations in the United Kingdom, to make sure that this issue is properly and fully addressed to the best of our ability.
Question number 5, Sandesh Gulhani.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister what steps the Scottish Government is taking in response to the reported announcement that NHS Scotland's IT software supplier, INPS, has entered administration in light of concerns that this could leave GPs without the digital infrastructure to maintain electronic health records.
First Minister.
President Officer, I want to begin by assuring the Chamber that there is currently no impact to patient care or the availability of IT systems for GPs as a result of this announcement. Scottish Government officials are liaising with NHS National Services Scotland, who hold the national framework contract with NPS on behalf of NHS Scotland and the NPS administrators. NSS have established an incident management team and contingency planning is underway. The Royal College of General Practitioners, the British Medical Association, GP practices and health boards in Scotland have been fully appraised of the situation. Officials have also been engaged with counterparts across the four nations, with a further meeting due to take place tomorrow. This is an emerging situation. The company is now formally up for sale, and I anticipate the Cabinet Secretary will be able to provide a fuller update to Parliament in January.
Sandish Gulhani.
A declaration of interest as a practising NHS GP. The BMA has told me that the Scottish Government has not invested well in GP IT infrastructure. Hardware is out of date. We are using legacy software without support from software companies, and our systems in our Scottish GP surgeries are often designed for the English market, downgraded and shoehorned into our surgeries. The First Minister said there's currently no issues, but INPS supplies Vision, one of our most vital systems, and it's a disaster waiting and in the making, potentially leaving GPs unable to safely see patients. In fact, a GP in Orkney wrote to us with this exact concern. What will the First Minister do to ensure the integrity of our vital NHS IT infrastructure?
First Minister.
Well, the Government is focused on exactly that point, and that's why I indicated that there is an incident management team with contingency planning underway, and various of the relevant organisations that need to be advised about these issues are currently being advised. There is, of course, this technical capability within our GP practices already, and the Health Secretary will be actively engaged to make sure that our officials are doing everything they can to support the continued provision of that activity. But I come back to my key point, that there is currently no impact to patient care or the availability of IT systems for GPs as a result of this announcement.
Thank you. Question number 6, Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what consideration the Scottish Government has given to what the potential impact might be on deaf and deaf-blind people of the termination of its contract with Contact Scotland BSL.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government wrote to the supplier of Contact Scotland BSL on the 4th of December, notifying them that their contract would come to an end on the 31st of March 2025 in accordance with its terms. First of all, I want to be clear that there will be no break in service for users of Contact Scotland BSL whilst we retender for the free service. We will work closely with BSL users in Scotland and the current supplier of Contact Scotland BSL to design this service to ensure that it best meets the needs of those who use it, raises awareness of the availability of the service and therefore also increases the number of users.
Mark Griffin.
This does seem to be a change in direction from the Government, because in its letter to the existing service provider, they were informed that the contract would not be retendered. So I'm sure members in the gallery, deaf members across the country, will welcome the news that this service has to be retendered, which is different, as I say, from the information that I've received so far. So if that is a change in Government position, that is welcome, because I think we should put ourselves in the shoes of a deaf person. You imagine that you're not feeling well, you go to your GP and you're referred for further tests. You go to that consultant's appointment, you can't get an interpreter. Previously, before we had this service in place, they would often have to take family members. You imagine taking a teenage family member to interpret the devastating news that you could potentially receive. So this change in information is welcome from the Government, but I would ask the First Minister if he'll make sure that the deaf and deafblind community are fully consulted on what this new service will look like.
First Minister.
I give Mr Griffin that assurance, and I'm sorry if there has been an impression that there was to be no retendering of the service. I'll make sure that that is properly explored. I know the long-standing interest that Mr Griffin takes in these issues. He's given a very distinguished contribution to Parliament on these topics, and I want to make sure that the legitimate issues he raises are properly explored. So I give the assurance that there will be engagement with the BSL community, And if Mr Griffin wishes to raise any more material with me about this to seek further assurance, he knows that I'll happily engage with him about that question, as will ministers, to make sure that this service is available for all the legitimate reasons that he puts to me today.
Stephen Kerr.
What the First Minister has said in response to Mark Griffin. But Mark Griffin is right. In the correspondence the Scottish Government sent to the existing service provider, it says, and I quote, "Following ministerial agreement in November, the Scottish Government will not be retendering a BSL video relay service." So it says it very clearly in the letter. So will the First Minister now confirm that the service is not being defunded and that there will be no break or disruption to Contact Scotland BSL service as it is now operating?
First Minister.
In my earlier answer, I said, and I'll read it again, because it's printed and typed in front of me, so this information will have to be correct. And I'm becoming slightly uneasy with the frequency with which this question is getting put to me, that this wording better be correct. I want to be clear, there will be no break in service for users of Contact Scotland BSL whilst we re-tender for the free service. Now, there's clearly an issue here which I need to get to the bottom of, because if I'm getting it from both sides of the chamber, I better make sure that's absolutely watertight. But that's the commitment I'm giving to Parliament today, and because I've given Parliament that commitment today, that's what's going to have to happen.
Thank you. We move to general and constituency supplementaries, and I call Colette Stevenson.
Presiding Officer, when the previous Conservative Government proposed closing FCDO operations in East Kilbride, I stood with the Labour Council leader against this bad decision, one which will remove 1,000 jobs from the town and have a negative impact on many employees who are settled there. The then Labour candidate for Westminster rightly said that taking away these jobs would cause much damage. However, the new Labour government has doubled down on this Tory plan, hoping to leave as soon as 2026. However, no updates from local Labour politicians have been forthcoming, given recent developments. Previous UK government figures suggest that ploughing ahead with this move could hurt East Kilbride's economy to the tune of £30 million. Can the First Minister confirm if the UK Government has discussed this with the Scottish Government and whether the Labour administration has shared an updated economic impact assessment for the cost of its abandonment to East Kilbride?
First Minister. So first of all, let me express my thanks to the committed workforce at the FCDO in East Kilbride. They have a long history and long tradition of contributing towards international development activity from East Kilbride. It's been a source of great pride within that community and across Scotland. I'm not aware of any direct contact with the Scottish Government on this issue or any updated economic assessment, but I will, if there is any update required to Colette Stevenson on that point, I will make sure that is forthcoming to her, because we do value this employment and recognise its importance in the East Kilbride economy.
Pauline McNeill.
On Sunday, the 15th of December, the day of the Scottish Cup final, we witnessed appalling scenes of violence and disorder in the city centre of Glasgow, caused by groups of football supporters, not representative, of course, of the vast majority of football fans. So let me say firstly, I agree with the First Minister when he said in response to this that the clubs have a role to play in preventing this disgraceful behaviour. So we agree on that. But my question is, given the police are now trying to identify those responsible by the use of CCTV and social media footage, is the First Minister aware that CCTV cameras in Glasgow are no longer staffed 24 hours, 7 days a week? So before the 3 p.m. shift, that means you cannot zoom in or have detailed monitoring of disorder in real time. Now, I fully appreciate that the First Minister will say that you're not responsible for CCTV in Glasgow. But what I'm asking for is for the First Minister not to stay silent about this. And does he believe that Police Scotland need all the resources available to tackle crime, not only in relation to football events, but other crimes such as violence against women that often occur out with these hours. So does the First Minister agree? You may not be aware of this, I appreciate this.
Briefly, please.
It's an absolute scandal that Police Scotland were not consulted when Glasgow City Council removed 24/7. I would like the First Minister to agree with me on this. Thank you.
First Minister.
President Officer, I'll have to look into the specifics of the CCTV shift patterns because it's not something for which I carry responsibility, so I'll have to explore that point. But on the substantive issue that Polly McNeill puts to me, first of all, I want to make it clear that the overwhelming majority of the fans who attended the football match behaved perfectly well. This is a minority that we are talking about, and their behaviour has got to be addressed. It is just not acceptable for Christmas shoppers to have to go through what they went through on Saturday. And whether it's Christmas shopping or any other day, it's just not on. The clubs have got a role, the police have got a role. Police Scotland had the situation in the city centre, unpleasant as it was, entirely under control, and they adapted their operational planning to deal with the situation as it emerged. So I have every commendation for the police in the way they deployed their resources. But fundamentally, it is unacceptable for football fans, even a minority, to behave in the fashion they behaved on Sunday. There cannot be a repeat of that. The police will be planning to deal with all of that, but the clubs have got to take action, and those responsible have got to be apprehended.
David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Harlan and Wolff's deal with Navanta will save thousands of jobs, many of them at the Methil Yard in my constituency. Will the First Minister join me in welcoming the deal, which will protect both the workforce and shipbuilding industry in Scotland?
First Minister.
Sir, I do welcome the very positive news that's come from the deal between Harlan and Wolff and Navantia. This has come about with a great deal of engagement from the Deputy First Minister, trade unions, management and staff, and collaboration with the United Kingdom Government. It will obviously provide security and reassurance to employees at the Methil Yard in Mr Torrance's constituency, and also at the Arnish site in the Western Isles in the constituency of Dr Allen. So this is welcome news, and I'm delighted to see it.
Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm sure we're all looking forward to our festive break. I know I certainly am. But it's fair to say that there are many people across Scotland find Christmas and New Year a very difficult time of year, particularly those facing social isolation, loneliness, grief, depression or illness. We often see, unfortunately, huge spikes of domestic violence at this time of year, fuelled mostly by alcohol. So, as well as paying tribute to those frontline blue light workers that we all thank for their time and service, can we also pay tribute to the vast armies of volunteers in the third sector who, day in, day out, 24/7, 365 a year, will also be there to help people in times of need and trouble? And as we look into 2025, will he commit his government supporting the third sector as best we can, given that their work very often starts when other public services end?
First Minister.
President Officer, I happily associate myself with the remarks of Mr Green, who's given a very substantial contribution to the issues of mental well-being and support for individuals wrestling with social isolation and loneliness within Parliament, and I commend him for doing that. There are a whole range of different third sector organisations who provide invaluable support, and as First Minister I have the privilege to encounter many of them and to engage with them, and it's heartwarming to see the vital role that they perform within our society, and they will be doing so over the Christmas break when many of us will be appreciating some time of respite. So I do associate myself very much with Mr Green's remarks. I assure him that the Government's budget will be focused on supporting third sector organisations. They are a linchpin in the delivery of many of the interventions that we need to put in place to support the mental well-being of individuals. And obviously Parliament will consider these questions in the spring to make sure we have that support in place for these organisations.
Ros McCall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Lilias Graham Trust, based in Thornhill near Stirling, has been a lifeline for families in Scotland for decades. Providing residential support and parenting capacity assessments was all part of their mission to help families on the edge of care who were impacted by adverse childhood experiences, trauma, social exclusion and poverty. On the 22nd of November, the decision was taken to wind up the trust, and this vital residential facility will close its doors on the 31st of January, after having written to the Minister for Young People, Children and the Promise for support, which wasn't forthcoming. Now, given that the sustainability of services at this centre of the Scottish Government's commitment to keeping the promise is vital support given by third sector organisations such as the Lelius Graham Trust in improving the lives of children, families and communities at risk of disappearing altogether. So, First Minister, how can your government claim to keep the promise if it idly stands by and lets long-standing third sector organisations who are actually keeping it go to the wall?
First Minister.
I understand the sentiments that underpin Ros McCall's question, but I'm not familiar with the case that she puts to me about the Lilius Graham Trust, and I'm sure the Trust has made a significant contribution to supporting the well-being of children and young people. But there will, as is always the case in some of these areas, be changes to service provision that are driven by changes in the way in which we support families. For example, at the heart of the promise is a determination to try to keep families together and to avoid the separation of families. So there may be a shift in resources to put more resources into supporting families, to keep them together, and that would be consistent with the direction of policy within the promise, because that is fundamentally the core point in the promise. So there may be changes in service provision. If I look at the City of Glasgow, for example, there's been very significant changes in the way the City of Glasgow deploys its expenditure for care experienced young people, because it has now shifted its balance away from provision that it provides to putting much more support into supporting families to stay together. So I'll look at the issues that Ros McCall raises with me today. I'll take counsel from the Minister for Children, Young People and Keeping the Promise, and I'll reply in writing to Ros McCall about the issues involved.
Bob Doris.
Presiding Officer, my constituency has no banks. They've all deserted the communities I serve. At Springburn Town Centre, however, there's a Crown Post Office. It's an anchor tenant in the local shopping centre and provides a vital service to hundreds of customers every week. A strategy agreed by the UK Labour Government and been taken forward by the Post Office could axe this service and be a body below for financial inclusion and local regeneration plans. Can I ask the First Minister how the Scottish Government could help support areas like Springburn facing such challenges, and will he write to the UK Government, as I have done, urging them to halt this flawed process and to engage meaningfully with local communities and trade unions to ensure the Post Office can have a strong and vibrant future at the heart of Springburn?
First Minister.
Professor, I understand the importance of the point that Mr Doris puts to me, and I can confirm that the Minister for Public Finance, Ivan McKee, has written to the UK Government on this question. In the absence of banking facilities, the Post Office becomes central to the delivery of access to finance for individuals. And given the concerns that Mr Doris has raised, and there was a parliamentary debate on this subject, I think led by Mr Gibson the other day, which provides an illustration of the degree of parliamentary concern on this question. So I do confirm that we will, that letter has been written, and we will engage with the UK Government on trying to find a different approach to this flawed process.
Daniel Johnson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I remind the Chamber of my register of interest, a director of a company with retail interest and a member of the trade union USDA. The First Minister may have read an article published 2 days ago on the BBC website highlighting a spiralling pattern of violence targeted against retail workers in my constituency. A detailed instance of one business owner having a knife drawn on him, a customer hospitalised, a shop worker, a shop owner punched and a store manager throttled. And these aren't isolated incidents. Last year alone, 5,500 incidents were recorded against the Protection of Retail Workers Act, which I took through Parliament, and that was a 46% increase in the rise of such incidents. So does the First Minister agree with me that greater priority needs to be given to community and response policing so that these crimes can be treated with the expediency and seriousness that these crimes undoubtedly are? And perhaps above above all else, at this time of year, when many of us will be using the shops, does he agree with the Scottish Retail Consortium and USDAW's campaign that we need to treat retail workers with kindness at Christmas?
First Minister.
I think we should treat retail workers with kindness 365 days a year, because the root of the issue that Mr Johnson raises is criminal conduct and the fact that people are not behaving appropriately. And whether that's about criminal conduct or disrespect to retail workers, it is part of the same pattern. So I agree with the sentiments that Mr Johnson puts to me. The Government has put into the budget £3 million as a specific intervention to tackle retail crime. This will be taken forward as a partnership between the retail sector and the police, and this will be in addition to an investment next year of a record £1.62 billion for policing, which is an increase of £70 million on 24-25, which I think provides the resources that enables us to have effective community policing, and I'm advised on that point by the Chief Constable of Police Scotland. And of course, all that we need to do is we need to pass that budget. And I just leave that message and that clarion call to Mr Johnson to be able to support the Government to make sure we can get on with tackling the legitimate issue that he puts to me by making sure the Government's budget is passed in February.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the Chamber and the public gallery to do so before the next item begins.